Hi everyone, welcome back to the bilingualism theory. In today's session, I'm going to talk about synergic concept in the bilingual mind. When you hear about synergic concept in this talk, we will find out what they are and why it's important to know about this phenomenon. When we work with bilingual students, or you can figure it out if you are bilingual yourself to see if you learn differently and conceive the word differently than monolingual people. My name is Han Din, and I'm currently a PhD candidate in Curriculum Instruction, Department of Educational Theory and Practice, School of Education. And this presentation is actually a part of my research project that has been published on languages, synergic concept, lexical idiosyncrasies, and lexical complexity in bilingual student translated texts as effort to resolve conceptual inequivalences. So in our talk today, I will talk about what is a concept, what are components of a word concept, what is a conceptual planning in a bilingual mind, and then we also talk about synergic concept and some example of them from my research, and the implication of synergic concept in bilingual education. So let's start the first part. What is concept? So look at the pictures on the screen and tell me, when I show you a collections of images like that, and imagine that these images can be presented as words, voices, abstract things like mental images in your mind. So when I show you a collection of images like this and ask you to name one thing that can denote, that can refer to this whole collection, what is the word that pop up in your mind? Yes, school, schooling, subject, literacy, disciplines. Very good. So you can see that when you look at these, let's say, mental representation, you might think of school, think of subject, think of study. Somebody can think a little bit more abstract rather than concrete things like intellectuality. And of course, some people will think of the concept not encoded necessarily in English language, but it can be in Vietnamese language, in Chinese language. So I'm a Vietnamese, I definitely think of the concept tri thức, like knowledge in general, knowledge about a lot of disciplines, or học vấn, intellectuality. So a concept seems to be the device through which we construct and we mirror the word inside our head. And it is. So what is a word concept? The meaning concept is, it has been explored in many disciplines like cognitive science, philosophy of mind, pragmatics. Pragmatics is, how context play an important role in order to define what a word means, what the concept means in each context. So the context is a very important factor in pragmatics, but we also talk about that, the concept in pragmatics field. But the word is actually comes from a Latin word, which means to conceive. So that's why I say, when you grow up, like from a baby to an adult, you build up a lot of concept in order to make sense of the word. So to a certain extent, why I mentioned that, because you will see that the way that concepts are constructed rely a lot on how you experience the word. So it's not just the input, not just the immersion, but also an individual factor played the key role here. The intake, how you conceive the word matters. So from my experience, from my demonstration, the example, you can see that concept can be an abstract idea or a mental representations, a unit of knowledge, It can represent the definition of a thing or a substance, a phenomenon. And within the concept, you will see in the example, it has a lot of subunits, and they act as the characteristics of the concept to describe the concept, to make sense of the concept. And so a concept also constitutes many other units that characterize it. And so in a language, the words are labels of concepts. So usually a concept is something that in your mind, but when it comes to the word, it's uttered through your mouth, it's usually connected with a single meaning of a term. But is that it? Do you want to add anything about the definition that I just say? What is the concept made of? So do you have any other ideas or other different way to define the concept? Now, when we look at the components that characterize it, we can feel that when you are babies, the concept are pretty concrete concept. But when you go to school, it becomes, your vocab become expanded, become broadened, and you can conceive the word around you in a more abstract manner. For example, when you look at the screen and I show you an image, that image linked to your brain, and then you link it with a concept and also with a word that corresponding to it. And that link can be the meaning of the word that you are thinking about, right? So what is the word that pop up in your mind? Yeah, I know, like a lot of us from the United States, you probably think of the commitment, the official commitment in front of somebody who witnessed all the ceremony, and some of you, the meaning of this word can also mean commitment, connection, that recognized by even the law in the United States, right? And then also, depending on where you're from in the United States, you can also add some very detailed, like I tell you that you think of more abstract, right? So you will also add like little details on it. Somebody would think of the wedding in a barn, but some people would think of it, like a hotel. But the common things in this community is you think of the girl dressed in white, and then the groom dressed in elegantly in suit, right? So it's in the United States. Now, if you are coming to China or Vietnam, it's a difference. The details is a little bit different. Of course, there's something we have in common because we also think of commitment, we think of connection. But some of us, we think in the native language. And with the native language, even it's still commitment, it's still connection, it's still boys and girls, but the extent of how love is involved in a marriage can be different. For example, some societies still really consider a part of wedding meaning is the connection between two families, and also the meeting between two people can be an arrangement. In Vietnam, we also think about the traditional way to dress, and wedding is more involved two families knowing each other, eating with each other, getting to know each other in details. And then in China, we still have the red represent wedding instead of white. The traditional colors of vibrance, of prosperity is red. So red is represent and has the connection with wedding. But in Hungary, it's also a different setting, a different context. So we think about the same concept of wedding generally speaking, but specifically speaking, we're referring to something subtle differences. So then if we can talk about shared components of a concept across all culture, what are the components of it? You will see that one specific component that integral to the meaning of the concept, to the constitution of the concept is, yes, context, culture. So that's why a lot of scholars refer to word concept is more than just the meaning that define, that characterize the concept and recorded in the dictionary, because the concept is also a unit of memory. It's how humans spend time with their people in the same community to experience life, to experience similar range of emotion, dislike, like. So it's a semantic slide of life. It's a multi-dimensional cluster of things. These concepts can link with different range of emotion depending again on where you are from, where you live, right? So sense is the connotative meaning of the word, negative, neutral, positive, that we are talking about. And yes, it's a genre, it's a gene. Concept is a gene of culture. And we can see that concept cannot be independent from the context that it is born from. So the concept is also point to the text, the situation or knowledge that created them, and it reflects the people cultural understanding of real world, prefer ways of saying things, prefer ways of doing things. That is the concept encoded. That's why the first part that characterize a concept, and we talk about that, is the things that we have in common no matter where you're from. Wedding, and then you have the equivalent of wedding in a lot of languages. It actually contains the word specific semantic conceptual properties. So those conceptual properties means they are the internal structure, they are semantic properties that make the word that have the compositional meaning that can be inserted into a sentence to make sense, and people, the speaker, that when they utter that word, they mean that concept, they link that word to that concept right away. So I would say that the semantic conceptual property form a finite base, because a concept, it can be represented by a label, by a word. And if you look at the dictionary, you will know that this words have a finite meaning. The first meaning, second meaning, three meaning, third meaning. For example, play, the concept play can be defined in the finite meanings, right? Representation in the dictionary. So I would say that those meaning, those semantic conceptual property will reflect the core sense of a word. However, like I just demonstrated, and it's not just words that have the social and cultural history encoded in it. You can find this culture-specific conceptual property in any word class. When we talk about play, you usually link it like play the piano. So in English, that's the thing. But in Vietnamese, it's also vibrate the piano, like, or it just describe the action in different ways that Vietnamese culture conceive the phenomenon. So if that makes sense, it means that even is a verb, it also have culture specific conceptual property encoded in it. And these properties are like we agree they're very context dependent, and they will be they will evoke and trigger the culturally related responses when we hear the word. For example, when in the Korean think of the word patronize in their Korean language, it's mean negative meaning. But in the US, it's actually that word, that concept denote a very like neutral meaning. So those are the social cultural laws or the social cultural connotations, and it can change from language to languages. So I and it not change from languages and culture, but it changes also from the context of situation. So it's very emergent. Like for example, gay, the word gay, the concept gay used to be very negative, but then in the emergent context, it has positive meaning as well, and it can denote different things. So it can change. So they are the consents of a word. Consents, it means it can be created as an emergent entities of the concept. So like I say, because it's connotative meanings, it usually reflect the experience of a community, like a wide range of emotion they share, of the action they do, of the tradition they carry on. So usually when we talk about social cultural laws, we will link it to the feelings and attitudes that very reflect culture specific evaluation. So when we talk about the dynamics of the concept in the bilingual mind, you will see that for bilingual people, they do not experience just one language or one static culture. They live with different culture, they live with different people. So actually there's a conceptual chain in what we call conceptual base. So in the conceptual base, let's say we call it the brain, the foundation of thinking. We have concept. Think of it abstractly as what I just depicted on the screen. And each concept, like we say, has semantic representation, the dictionary meaning, and the social cultural conceptual properties, which I denote here as pragmatic representation because it's reflect the contextual meaning, and it has social cultural load with feelings and attitude in it. And each concept is governed in a real world of 3-4 ways of thinking of a community, and the norms, behavioral norms, or the normal way that people are doing things. So it affects the concept and how we evoke the concept, right? But imagine that each concept like that, when this person moved to live with different culture, they add in new pragmatic contextual meaning, right? And they can even add in the new dictionary meaning as well, like play in Vietnamese concept, in concept that's rooted in Vietnamese language. It's different in meaning when you open the dictionary and look at the play meaning in America. Like we don't say make money. We in Vietnamese sense, it's more like to earn money, to look for money than to make money. But in the American conceptualization, it's like to make money, for example, like that. So that's reflect the conceptual blending. It means we created something new from the new culture in the new language. And that kind of conceptual property just adding to the existing concept that we have. So that is called conceptual blending in our common underlying conceptual base. But the thing is that all happen in our mind. If you think about each concept can be mapped onto words. Is this that easy when you map out the kind of the product of conceptual blending in your mind to a specific language channel? Well, you may say that we don't have enough vocab in your not dominant language, right? So for example, I know what it means in English. I know that that concept is very clear to me in Vietnamese, but I lost for words. What kind of words we say in that context for English? What kind of proverbs we think of? What kinds of adjective is that instead of good? How the American will say in that context that means exactly how to lexicalize that understanding in terms of culture into words. Yeah, so that is what the synergic concept look like. It can be lexicalized in two languages. However, it's carry in each word different social cultural laws. So in this label, you will see the theory that I just mentioned in a vivid manner. So we have the core sense of the word on one hand, we have the content of the word on the other hand, and we have the concept deep rooted in each language. And usually the first language concept tend to be more prominent and more dominant, and how prominent and more dominant, how long it is. Well, for a bilingual person, it's very rare to say that we have a balanced bilingualism. So basically, we can have and grow our second language concept more and more, depending on our more and more intake, more and more recognize realization of how the native speaker of that community conceptualize. But it takes time, and research and scholars are still studying about it. Usually we say 4 years is the years that we start to change and become more better as conceptualization like the people native speaker in our second language. But like I say, like how do you know that maturity in conceptual blending? In the way that they use synergic concept, you will know it when you look at the products. That's how they lexicalize those synergic concept in very specific context, and it's accurate, right? So like I say, synergic concept are conceptual planes that can be lexicalized in two languages and encode the history of their prior use, represented by two or more labels in first language and second language. And they can be used in not just only production, but also comprehensions. Like you just not only recognize the word's meaning, but you recognize why and how this word and this concept is used in this context when you communicate and you comprehend the text. So in my research, I try to track those synergic concepts, and the question that I raise is to what extent do we think alike? So I compare the bilingual who have been living in the United States for more than 4 years, and I also compare the bilingual who learn English, but they still stay in their first language culture. And I also compare the bilingual living in the US and the bilingual living in the first language, and in this case, China, with the monolingual who know one language only in the United States, and they are English native speaking Americans. And then from my data, then I can see if they think alike, there will be more cluster. As you can see, if two groups think alike, there will be more cluster, and then the bubble, the concept will be larger compared with the two groups that think so differently. The bubble will be very small, and then it's scattered. So I look at different way when they, for example, when I look at one concept indoctrinate, I see how it changed when that group of people learn an additional language in addition to their first language, right? So let's say I have English Chinese bilinguals. So I know that the L1 concept is Chinese main concept, and now they learn English. So what else? Will they change the semantic representation, or will they change the culture specific properties, and how much they similar to the way they're bilingual in China think, and how alike their thinking, their synergic concept are with the concept made by monolinguals in the United States. But the interesting I find is usually we assume that people in even they stay in the United States, they still think, because L1, like I say, L1 concept is so strong, they would think alike with their bilingual in the home country. And then I hypothesize that this group will also, because they are in the middle, right? They experience both culture. They stay in the United States while learning English. So they will be more aligned with the American monolingual speakers. However, my research shows very idiosyncratic patterns. Actually, the bilingual in China and the bilingual in the United States, they think really like each other, like an equal chance, like half of the time. Like if you have 10 people, 5 people will think exactly like the bilingual in China. So you see that it's strongly correlated the way they think. However, the next is the bilingual student in China who study English but in China, and the monolingual. So it means the semantic properties are very important. You learn a language, even you don't experience their culture, you actually can open a door to their culture. They think really alike. The bilingual student in China and the American student stand second. They think alike each other, more alike each other rather than the bilingual student in the United States and the monolingual, the American speaker. So it showed me that actually, when you not just only know the language, you live in their culture, the way you think can be different from either culture. You will arrive at the third stage. And my study shows that pattern. Not just only in the semantic properties, but also in the cognitive, attitudinal dimensions. So look at this. So when I have the core sense, actually you will see the core sense, the priority of core sense is a little bit different, which is more salient in their mind. So for example, when the bilingual in China, they think of the indoctrinate, they actually think of Confucius teaching. They think that is a part of their culture to indoctrinate somebody, especially somebody from an inferior rank in the society. And they think of the way to exchange knowledge and the way to communication. So that is the core sense, the core meaning of this word. However, you will see that because again, they think really like the bilingual in the United States, right? So the bilingual in the United States also think that there's a way to teach the knowledge, to inform, but they start to deviate from the bilingual in China. They start to think that indoctrinate can also have a sense of control, of brainwash. So in some context, it can also have that sense, this concept can also have the sense of brainwashing. And that concept is negative, right? When you look at the monolingual, you will see that brainwashed appear, but definitely no Confucius teaching, right, in their cultural specific conceptual properties. They also align with the Chinese bilingual in China. They also think that, okay, this is also a concept to inform and show that you pass your belief in somebody. However, they also think of the thing that's salient in American mindset is also someone that can be dictator or extremist, or it can be related to Christian missionary Christian religious ideology, and is carry the meaning negatively, like rote teaching and brainwash. And you can see the bilingual in the United States, they also have experienced the same. That I see the green stuff. So the bilingual in USA, actually they have the green stuff, and also the pink stuff from both group. But the Chinese bilingual in China, they still demonstrate the semantic, the same semantic, almost the same semantic properties, but their culture specific is really Chinese, affected by the Chinese culture, and American monolingual affected by American culture. But the bilinguals in the United States, they kind of like a good plan, and even they think of it as a more like an act to discipline somebody, to control a group. So this one is a little bit stronger than the monolingual. So they start to think of it in the way that how they think is a little bit, different than Americanists as well, right? So they're not just only different, they're a combination, but then the way that they, when you look at the characteristic, is different both from the bilingual in China and also the monolingual in the United States. So overall, three groups feel the same about this concept, and it depends, of course, on their culture. So it means that in Chinese culture, in American culture, the majority will think of this word as a negative meaning. However, when we look deeply into it, actually, the Chinese think of this word as a more, as also like neutral word, and also American monolingual think of it like a little bit neutral as well. But indoctrinate to a bilingual in the United States, they actually think more people in this group think of this as positive meaning than the American monolinguals and the Chinese. So the American and Chinese, they think of it in addition to negative meaning, this word has neutral meaning, neutral sense. But for the bilingual in the United States, it has negative meaning, but also has positive meaning. Right? They don't think this word is neutral. It can be used either positive meaning or negative meaning. So that is the difference in the way that they conceive this concept, conceptualize this concept. So you will ask me why it is important to look carefully into how people think, and especially how the bilingual in the United States think. Well, because in higher education, you will see more characteristic of a bilingual education because it's internationalized. We talk about the internationalization of higher ed, and we have people coming from different backgrounds, different words. But actually, when we look at the product, the assessments to be created by monolingual, monocultural instructor and faculty members, for example, like that. So it means when somebody from different culture that are not dominant, not mainstream, they come to the United States to study, they usually produce the word choice based on how they conceive the word. And in the case of the bilingual people from China to move here and stay, even after 4 years, they also conceive the word in a way that's so different from both the L1 and L2. So even when they come back and write in Chinese, they different too from the Chinese native speaker. And also in here, if they write and speak in English, they also write and speak in a different way than the American monolingual people. So again, we need to think about that because it helps us to understand that their word choices are different, and to what different that we can have a common ground in terms of assessment, or else we need to discuss and teach them also the senses and how word can be appear in a more contextualized manner, so that they can have successful communication. Successful communication is the key, right? They will produce because they conceive it differently, they feel about it differently, they will use it differently in the context, especially if they don't have as much as immersion and experience like the American do, because it's their first their language and their culture. But the bilingual, they don't have the same experience, so they may produce idiosyncratic word phrases, and those word phrases used to only be considered as errors, as deviation. But right now, it's actually, when you know about their power to synergize concept, and synergize not just only one concept, but different groups of concept, you will know that it's their gift. They're gifted, so they're different. So bilinguals, when you learn additional language, you can see the word from a different lens. And that's what I use that image at the beginning of my talk. The bilingual student will arrive at the third space. They think more problem, which reflect a unique emergent language use. But this also means the cognitive ability for fantasy, for imagination, for abstraction, for expressiveness. And so that's what we talk about, the bilingual pragmatic competence. If they are instructed in a way that appropriate, that encourage, instead of looking at them as deficit, they will be more empowered, and they will have the competence to be more flexible and function very, very well in each context, in each culture. So they can be great interpreters, and not just interpreters at the level of word by word, but it can also the interpreters at the context that can help the two sides understand each other culturally. And that in this class, you will study more about, in this series, about what is a dual language system and what a maturity in thinking and in controlling your thinking, controlling your language channel at the highest level, at the more mature level, how it looks like, how two language can dually support and complement each other, how you can help your students to thrive in both language and use their languages and cultures as repertoire. So bilingual have an advantage over monolingual in cognitive flexibilities, and that is the aim, that what we should think about. So we need to modify assessment and the way that we interact with people, so we understand them as who they are, and we have the opportunities to develop and to enhance and to take advantage of their abilities for our own use. So that is the end of this sharing of this talk and what my press research is about. Of course, I choose a very typical point here is the third space, but I figure out that the third space is kind of rare. Actually, most of the time, like I say, the first language concept is still the dominant one. So it shows that when you learn a new language, possibly in our time, and the individual factor plays a role here, we actually acquire the semantic dictionary. That's also included the history of the cultural use already. But in order to push to the next level of having a synergic concept that arrive at the creativity and imagination, we need richer input of cultural connection, empathy, and more understanding about how bilingualism works, I believe. So that's make me go to some, further question that we can consider. The first one is, do synergic concepts affect our conceptual categorization? Do the social cultural loss and conceptual blending create a communicative advantage or a disadvantage for bilinguals? If it is disadvantage, how can we resolve that problem? And what is the role of culture-specific conceptual properties in a multilingual classroom? So I know that they come and as teacher, we start to build and cultivate the second language concept, but usually we ignore the first language concept. So that's not really the synergic concept we are talking about here. If we lose that opportunity to cultivate that, actually our bilingual student will experience the loss of their first language, and actually they will become monolingual instead of a bilingual learner. So, and then that's why we raise up a method called concept-based learning. So to what extent do you think concept-based learning from concept and learning about how concept can be constructed differently, is important in learning? So yeah, that's it. I hope that you enjoy the sharing and you can share your thoughts about this as well, especially in terms of bilingual education. So you will find the answer to this question in the series and in the talk in the class that we have. But yeah, welcome to the series and hope to see you in the future. Thank you. Bye bye.